Good morning. It's Monday, August 15th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. This is the Western Standard's daily live news, opinion, comment, rant, guest interview show. We hold Monday to Friday, 11:30 a.m. till about 1 p.m. usually. And yes, this is the final week of the show. There's going to be more stuff coming, lots of digital content and things going on. But this particular show will be wrapping up this Friday. Still, lots of good stuff to get through this week and cover, though, guys. And we'll have a good time as we get through these final 5 days. So let's see. We'll start, though, with some of the daily observations. I see you all coming in the comments. Scroll there. It's good to see you popping in from all over. Being live again, I love that. It makes it so much more fluid and interactive. It's really important. And use that comment scroll. Talk to each other. Talk to me. And yes, let's have some interaction. Just keep it civil. We can do that. So let's see. The daily observances. You know, they're really getting a little thin in August, as I said last week there. It's hard to find some interesting ones. I think people save them mostly for the later days. So let's see here. It's National Failures Day, though. That's a day I think we can all relate with. We've all had failures. This is the day to celebrate those failures, or maybe not celebrate them, but at least observe them. I mean, you know, with the failure, it's not necessarily all that bad. It's failures are just finding ways not to do things. It's only a problem if you keep repeating the same failure over and over and over again. And, well, today's the day maybe to dwell on a few of those failures and just make sure you don't do them a second time. It's also Lemon Meringue Pie Day. It's an odd one. And, you know, I myself, I can't stand meringue. It's kind of gross. I don't know. It seems like old frothed up saliva that's been speed cooked or something, but each their own. I like the lemon part, you know, but I kind of scrape that stuff off to the side and dine on it. But some people do feel that it's an important enough pie to have a day to observe it and recognize it. And so if you're a lemon meringue pie person, well, today's your day, guys. This is the day to go out and froth it up and get it. And don't bother sending any over here, though. All right, it's going to be a pretty political show today, as usual. Anyways, I've got a couple of good guests on who have political viewpoints, of course. I got Jay Hill. He's going to be coming on a little later. We'll talk about some federal issues. He was, of course, a member of parliament for, I believe, 17 years. That's a long time hanging around with all those clowns in Ottawa, and he still managed to maintain a good degree of sanity and has a lot of good stuff to share. And then later on, we'll have Drew Barnes coming on, independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, and we'll talk about provincial issues. And there's a lot to talk about with what's going on in Alberta right now with the UCP leadership race and things like that. So that's where I'm going to kick it off with, let's talk some of that UCP stuff. So, I mean, most Albertans, we shudder at the prospect of a return to 4 more years of living under an NDP government. A number of factors led to that disastrous election in 2015. I mean, there was mistrust, bad campaigns, and of course, a divided conservative movement. With the Wildrose Party and the Progressive Conservatives battling each other throughout the campaign, it allowed the NDP to slide up the middle and win a majority government. So, I mean, it took a lot of compromise and a lot of work. But the factionalized Conservatives of Alberta managed to pull it together under a united banner with the UCP in time for the 2019 election. And with a single Conservative option to look at, voters happily tossed the NDP to the curb and gave the UCP a solid majority. And Jason Kenney deserves full credit for pulling all of that off. He was integral. He had the vision and he got it together. Now, though, Jason Kenney could be the one who fractures the movement all over again as he wades into the leadership race for the UCP. It was unprecedented as is, you know, for Kenney to remain on as a party leader as the race was held. I mean, that was already odd. Party leaders have been known to stay on after announcing their resignations, but that's usually when the leader's willingly choosing to resign, you know, on their own terms. When the leader's been tossed out by their own members, as Kenney had been, they tend to move on into the background after that. But whether it's an interim leader or an outcoming incumbent, it's usually recognized that the leader stays out of the leadership race. They certainly hold their views, but they keep it to themselves. Kenney has broken that convention now, though, as he went on a tirade about Danielle Smith's proposed Sovereignty Act. Kenney did this on a weekly radio show where he's supposed to be speaking as the premier. If it's going to turn into a platform for the leadership race, maybe it's time for that show to come to an end as well. The Sovereignty Act now, I mean, that's the main plank of Smith's campaign. And in light of her apparent status as the front runner of the race, I'd safe to say the proposal appeals to many, if not most of the members at this point. And whether or not it's workable or desirable will be determined by the members. If they select Smith, it would then head to the legislature for debate. Then it can be embraced, amended, or scrapped by our elected officials. Kenney still doesn't understand that his tough talk and weak actions when it came to dealing with Ottawa is what led to his ouster from the party in the first place. Members have had it with limp-wristed reactions to federal overreach, and Smith has offered them a lifeline. Members wanted to see something, anything, that the province can do to stand up to Ottawa. They're frustrated to the point where it doesn't matter if it's legally viable. They're ready to go on the offensive with a hostile federal government after years of failed defensive actions. And the Sovereignty Act offers a possible tool for that. If the Sovereignty Act fails, well, true secessionism is really going to rise as people are going to feel they're out of options. Maybe Smith's proposals were irresponsible. Maybe other candidates have better plans. Whatever the case may be, though, having the outgoing premier weighing in right now is fostering new divisions in a party that desperately needs to maintain unity. Leadership races can usually be heated and divisive. If they're held responsibly, though, they don't need to lead to the fracturing of the party. It was no secret that Kenney and the establishment in the party support Travis Taves in the leadership. Again, though, Kenney should have been keeping it to himself. With such heated rhetoric coming from the outgoing leaders, supporters of Taves and Smith are going to be more deeply entrenched in their views and taking them more personally than ever. Now, no matter what candidate wins, it's going to be all the more difficult for them to consolidate their leadership and unite the members in time for a general election that's less than a year away. The UCP right now is lucky. There's no alternative conservative parties well established right now. The Wildrose Independence Party is ripping themselves apart with infighting and won't be in any position to seriously contest the next election. And the other registered conservative-leaning parties really are unheard of. This can't be taken for granted, though. 7 months is an eternity in politics, and a lot can change by election time. I can't see a new entity winning the next election, but one could manage to cause enough division to lead to another Notley term in office. Kenney's no novice political operator. He knew how serious it would be if he stepped into the leadership race. One has to start wondering at this point, does Kenney have the best interests of the province and the party in mind right now? Or is he just hoping that nobody will succeed where he failed? We're heading for some hard economic times. The last thing Alberta needs is to sink into another 4 years of high-spending socialism under Notley. I'd hoped Kenney could go out with dignity. It doesn't look that way, and that hope's fading. And we all could be paying the price for it. And it really is disappointing. All right, well, that's what's got me going today. And yeah, it's just a bad thing. So let's bring Dave Naylor in to talk about some other news items to go on about today before we go further. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going well, Cory. How was your weekend? I hear you were high.
I was, yeah. All the way up to High Prairie, Alberta, hitting the north for a quick road trip there and back.
That was good. You used to work up there, right?
I've done work up there before. I had some contracts up that way when I was in the oil field. Yeah, it's quite a part of the world, that.
And I hear it was another exciting weekend for Duke the Wonder Dog. He finally was able to do something.
Yeah, there's that picture. Duke had, after many months of effort, actually figured out how to catch his tail and then started doing cartwheels all over the patio with the tail in his mouth, trying to figure out what the hell to do with it. I do think he's got some form of brain damage.
That's, you know what, for a dog, that's a great achievement. I also understand that you were having some fun with your bees again. We saw the video last Sunday of them all attached to your posterior. And I understand this weekend they all got attached to your face in terms of like a new beard.
Well, you know, I am terrible at growing facial hair. I never could grow a good beard, so I might as well use some sort of prosthetic out of the hobbies. I mean, now the hair just grows out of the top of my ears and my nose and gets thinner on my head. So a beard of bees isn't all that out of line.
Yeah, you know what? You might get in a bit of trouble, though, walking into the Prentice pub with that all on your face.
Wouldn't be the first time they kicked me out of there.
Oh, and probably not the last. So, yeah, we've got a lot of stuff already on the website, Cory. It's been a busy Monday morning. Top story at the moment is some really good video of an enraged cyclist. He got in a bit of road rage. He thought a female driver had honked at him. In fact, she hadn't. But the cyclist took it the wrong way and literally smashed out her passenger window with his fist. And there's some very good video, as I said, on that terrifying incident in Calgary at a Northwest Superstore. Following along lines of what the Premier did this weekend, Brian Jean has called on Danielle Smith to release her entire Sovereignty Act and says all the candidates should read it. And then be critical or supportive. And that's basically what Danielle Smith said after the Premier spoke, saying, you know, it was too early, you've got to read the entire thing and go from there. We've got a column from our David Marsden on the Athabasca University situation. This is a funny story. The staff in Athabasca basically doesn't want to work there. And even the president of the university is out living in Edmonton. So David opines about that strange situation. We've got a Wenzel column, Shane Wenzel, talking about the fact that Calgary does not have a sprawl problem, despite everything you hear from environmentalists and whatnot. And we've got a story out of Ottawa by Matthew Horwood on a coalition of unions and publishers who say the CRTC has way too much power in Canada, and it needs to be drawn back. So that's what we've got this morning, Cory. There's a lot more stuff that's up there that we won't have time to talk about. But yeah, busy morning, and I'm sure it'll continue into the hot afternoon.
Yeah, it's going to be a lively, warm week, that's for sure. Well, thanks for the update, and we'll look forward to the stories as they come out, Dave.
Thanks, Cory.
Great. That is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And as always, yes, lots going up there, all sorts of opinion and news copy going on. And the reason we can do that, of course, is because you guys have been subscribing. This is when I always remind you and thank you, because we've had thousands of subscribers, and this is how we can beat the mainstream media. This is how we report on the things they won't cover, is because you guys have stepped up and we stay independent of the government. We don't take a nickel from the federal government or provincial, any government, and we won't. I mean, we've got to remain accountable to you guys. So thank you to all who have subscribed. And if you haven't already, guys, hey, come on, $10 a month, $99 a year, and you get full access to all of our news and opinion content as it comes up, right there, unfettered. Go to westernstandard.news/membership. You can get a free trial. You'll see it's well worth it. And as Lucas said there, indie media, let's go. That's right. It's the way of the future, and it costs less than an old newspaper subscription used to anyways. Also, we rely on advertisers, and we do have a sponsor for an event coming up, and that is the Alberta Prosperity Project. So we'll just run this, and I'll get back and talk about some news after that.
On Thursday, August 25th, the Alberta Prosperity Project and Rebel News are hosting a special UCP leadership dinner and forum at the Edmonton Convention Centre. We're asking the UCP leadership candidates tough but fair questions, like how will they protect our rights and freedoms from the United Nations Agenda 2030 and World Economic Forum's Great Reset? How will they fight the climate change initiative? And how will they counter inflation? You won't want to miss this event. Get your ticket today at www.albertaprosperityproject.com.
There you go, guys. There's an event coming at the end of the month. You can meet some of those UCP leadership candidates and see some debating and talk about a number of issues, again, that you won't typically hear elsewhere. So check out the Alberta Prosperity Project to see the details about that and what's happening up there at the end of this month. Real good political times if you're a political weenie like me. All sorts of things happening. Speaking on a more depressing note for politics, we've got the Liberal Party of Alberta. Yes, they still exist. I don't know if you guys remember them. It's a sad and, well, not that sad. I guess they're liberals. But the Liberal Party, I mean, they were the very first party Alberta had, with Alexander Rutherford, I believe it was, our first premier in 1905. That was the Alberta Liberal Party. And, when we first came into Confederation, the only reason we had a Liberal to start with, of course, because we had a federal Liberal government, and they sort of rigged it, essentially, to make sure we had a Liberal government to start. And that didn't last terribly long. They got kicked out and replaced by the Alberta Farm Association, I believe was the next one after that. The UFA came in. But either way, they were always there as an official opposition. They were always a contender. All the way till the 90s, Lawrence DeCore brought it really close to actually winning until Ralph Klein kind of came along and pushed them aside. One of the lessons to learn from that, too, the reason the Liberals were actually close to winning in the 90s, they were actually campaigning from the right. They were talking about getting spending under control, reducing the deficit. Lo and behold, and Getty, meanwhile, was spending like a madman. Running as a conservative, running on an unapologetic conservative platform, at least fiscally, Ralph Klein managed to pull it back. And that's that reminder to a lot of people. If you are unapologetically conservative, you can still win. Do it for a change, guys. Do it. Either way, the Liberal Party now, I mean, it's just been on a slow decline, fading and fading. David Kahn managed to lose their last remaining seat. He's a bit of a douchebag. It's not that shocking, but all the same, they're down to nothing. So they finally held a leadership race. They've been leaderless for a year in some, or tried to. And they opened up the nominations for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Alberta. And they just closed the nominations on last Friday, I believe it was. and not a single person applied to the job. Nobody even wants to lead what's left of the Liberal Party of Alberta. The very first governing party of the province can't even beg somebody to manage to come in and lead them. So I got a feeling it's going to be the end. And, it does impact our politics. And we shouldn't rely on things like this, I guess, in the sense in order to win things. But part of the reason as well the Conservatives were always so strongly entrenched was when you had the Liberals and NDP splitting that left vote out there, it made it a lot easier for Conservatives to get in. And with the Liberal Party collapsing as they did, under Khan, and even prior to him, it did allow the NDP to become the natural, I guess, left of center or even far left alternative for people to come in. So we shouldn't dance on the grave of the Liberal Party too much, because coming up into this general election, next year in spring, I'm guessing, unless the Conservatives split themselves up or something, it's going to be a two-party race. And it's going to be UCP versus NDP. The Liberals are toast, so the NDP will be able to consolidate that. Waldo's Independence Party, they blew themselves up. They might recover, but I don't think they're going to recover in time to really put up a strong front in this race. The other thing to look at that might be interesting is the Alberta Party. They always talk big and finish poorly. They're overrated in a lot of ways. And the Alberta Party, they pretend to be conservative but always act liberal, and that's part of what always toasted them. Stephen Carter actually helped blow those guys up when he jammed Stephen Mandel in there and replaced their once popular leader, and they lost their only seat. But still, we're going to see a bunch of the progressive Conservatives, the ones who had gone into the PC party or the UCP party. UCP party, that drives Jane nuts when people say that. And tried to pull them left and pull them into establishment. And that's part of why the internal turmoil is still going on within that party right now. And if Taves wins it, it won't be that bad necessarily as far as that goes, but there's going to be a lot of tantrums if, say, Smith or Jean wins it, because the party will be actually conservative. So, and not that Taves is not conservative as well. Actually, he is, but he's establishment and more of the PCs. Now, I could see them making a leap towards the Alberta Party and trying to get that thing up and running again, too. I don't know how much impact that could or would have on the election, but that's what I'm saying, too. You can't take for granted the political scene, in avoiding having a split vote or just a possibility that will bring the NDP in. That's the thing we're almost terrified of. So seeing them ripping themselves up in this leadership race is of serious concern. We have to worry about that. Let's see some of the comments there. North Gun Raider, why are you providing free advertising and promoting Twitter? We don't provide free advertising, but if you want to buy ad space, we're more than happy to help fix you up with it. And promoting Twitter, I'm not even sure what you're talking about, to be honest. We're not promoting Twitter. In fact, the Western Standard got kicked off of Twitter for posting news stories. Our suspension ends in a couple of days. We appealed, but it didn't win in that. Ken Coop asking, are you a politician? I don't know if you're asking me or if you're asking somebody else. I'm not one anyways. I've run before, but I'm not running again. So we will see what happens here. So Lone Warrior asking, is the Maverick Party just a federal party? And yes, the Maverick Party is federal. That's what I'm assuming he's going to get here. He's never been late before, but you never know with downtown things. Jay Hill should be in studio in a little bit. He was the first leader of the Maverick Party. It came from Wexit. And as I said, he was a federal member of parliament for quite some time. And he got that party kind of running, and then it's a new leader is come in now. And they're running on the federal front. There is no provincial version of it. Provincially, there's really not much on the go. It really shows a lot. No, expand more on that. I mean, I've always been a person, supportive of independence. I mean, I founded the Alberta Independence Party, 22 years ago? That's depressing. With some others, of course. And, we blew up. And the Separation Party of Alberta came and went, and it blew up. And the Alberta Independence Party was kind of revitalized, and it came and went and blew up. And then they changed it to the Independence Party of Alberta, which has quickly become forgotten. Now we got the Wild Rose Independence Party ripping itself to shreds. There's nothing tougher to try to do. They get a bunch of independence-minded individualists to walk together in the same room in a party environment. And, my feelings on that, even though I'm saying it now because I've got the benefit of hindsight, having learned, if you're looking for independence, if you want a party to go, you can't have it. You can't have an overtly independence mandated party. It won't work. It doesn't mean you don't pursue independence, but if that's right in the party's name, if that's right in the party's mandate, if that's where it's going to go, it's not going to work. You're going to narrow your base too much. You're going to be basically inclined to splitting right off the bat. And I'm talking splitting with yourself. And it just leads to failure. It hasn't worked yet. I mean, if you look at the Quebec, where, I mean, at least in the past, their independence movement was a hell of a lot stronger than ours. I don't think it is anymore. But their parties, again, it was Bloc Québécois. It was not Separation Party of Québécois. It's, the Parti Québécois, not the Québécois Independence Party. And they didn't wear it on their sleeve, even though they certainly were pursuing independence. They didn't embrace that as their whole being as a party. So anybody hoping for an independence party coming up, I've heard some rumors of some people might be running for the Independence Party of Alberta, because they got all upset. It was the Alberta Independence Party, and then they changed their name to the Independence Party of Alberta, and nobody noticed or really cared. And I got a bunch of crabby emails for not paying attention to it. But, guys, you got to send press releases. We are not going to go out of our way to dig into every little thing you're doing with all 12 of you. There, Sarah's saying it sounds like Arthur Pawlowski might be running to lead the Independence Party of Alberta. So, Mr. Pawlowski can, if he takes the leadership of it, he's certainly got some degree of base of supporters, and he can go out there and push things. But come on, he's not going to have that much impact on the election in general. But I mean, again, it's a democracy. He can certainly do what he will. But if we're looking for theocratic leadership, that's not really where Alberta of these days is. Doug Shaver thinking, so you think Todd Loewen has no chance of winning? The polls are taken from the general public, not the UCP membership. Okay, Doug. Yeah, the last poll, and I don't think anybody said he has no chance of winning. Not here, anyways. There's still people got their nose out of joint, and they've been having a temper tantrum because we only had 3 people at the Frontrunners Forum the other week, which went very, very well. It's still online. You can watch that with a debate with Danielle Smith and Brian Jean and Travis Taves up there. But the polls we based it on were based on people who identified as UCP voters, which isn't the same as members. I understand that. But I mean, we're talking numbers it gives you an idea. Okay, so the top 3 were eating up 85% of what people were looking at in there. And then the remaining 4 candidates were split all amongst that remaining 15%. It's exceedingly unlikely that he was going to win. And we had to pick 3. That's just the way it had to go. We had to pick, and that's where it stood, and it stood out. It wasn't a matter of thinking over 1 point or 5 points here or there. And it's not, we're very supportive of Todd here. I know I've known him a long time, and I think very highly of him, and I look forward to seeing him doing more in politics and doing a good job. But guys, get over it. You're not winning any more friends, still just going on about how that happened in the leadership race. There was a reason we picked it that way. Doesn't make everybody happy, but if we've seen from the party-managed leadership debates, when you have 7 candidates up there, it's difficult to try and keep it interesting, to say the least. And we had to pick 3, and that's where it landed. It wasn't meant as a snub to Todd or anything like that, even if some didn't go along. Wendy Robinson said it didn't go well. You had 2 of the worst candidates. Well, whatever. Okay, I mean, you wanted Rajan Sani. We didn't have time to get her on the stage, Wendy. But from most reviews, anyways, from the people who viewed that, and you can see it on our YouTube channel, you can see it on Facebook, the debate was very, very well received. And for the hundreds of people who were there in person, they also, again, very much enjoyed the debate and found it to be pretty productive in helping them make their mind up there. The membership, that race is changing now. The phase of membership sales has ended. The cutoff's done. So now it's just a matter of these candidates, I guess, trying to convert other members, from the sales that were sold by other candidates to pull them all to themselves. And they often, I believe with this party to be the same as the others, now they all get access to the shared membership list. So if you guys are members, get ready for a real barrage. I'm sure you've already been getting it, but you're going to get a heck of a lot more contact and communications from the party volunteers with every campaign. And it's a tougher role. That's when it starts to get, we still got to worry a little bit more, because it's really tough to convert somebody's other, supporter. Like if they've, if this candidate B has sold memberships, now you've got access to the people they sold memberships to, and you've got to try and coax them to come your way. Your odds of conversion are really low unless that other candidate implodes. So some of the more desperate candidates, as it seems like they probably aren't going to win it, are going to get a bit desperate, and they might start lobbing some pretty nasty bombs. And that's what I worry about. That's what I worry about the party really ripping itself apart with, as the ones who are on the outside tried their hardest to change the others. So we still got a month and change going on with this race, and then the federal one's coming to a close quite soon. Just for everybody's happiness, I know they'll be thrilled. I'll say it now. I'm going to have Jean Charest on the show tomorrow. Everybody loves to hear from him. But all the same, speaking of people who are in the top 2 or 3 in contention for a race, well, Charest is at least in that top 3, and we'll have one more conversation before their race comes to an end. Let's see what else we got going on. Yeah, a good column. I like pushing some of our own stuff too. So Shane Wenzel did submit a column. He's been putting one out about once a month now, and I like it. He took on urban sprawl. That's that term they love using, that a derogatory term for what is basically just natural growth within cities. We see it in every municipality. There is, and he calls them, I believe he was calling them urban sprawl extremists within that column, and it's true. There's this fascination with demonizing outward growth in a city. And they think that if we could just build these high density, big towering city centers and cores, everybody will be happy, we'll save energy, cost of living will come down. Aside from the fact that it's completely untrue on every possible aspect, they're really hung up on it. Usually the environmentalists and the hard left and say, I live in my apartment downtown and I ride my bicycle to the coffee shop and back every day. The rest of the world should be able to too. But it doesn't work that way. And Shane also debunks the myth that downtown Calgary is somehow subsidizing the people living in those suburbs. It's just not true at all. Those new developments have to pay their own way. They pay their own taxes, and all of that stuff there gets paid for. There's no subsidy going on for the ones out there. So a column well worth reading. Looks like another chat about the weather. We're just looking at things. It has been a good hot August so far, and it's pretty roasting, and things are getting pretty dry. I think they put the fire bans on in my area finally, because the grass is browning up and the trees are getting brown. I'm not lighting the alarms, setting the alarms off about, this is going to be the end of the world and climate change and blah, blah, blah. We're having a heat wave. It happens. We're having a bit of a drought. But still do have to be a bit careful with some of these things. Watch it out there, guys. We don't need any forest fires. Unfortunately, due to bad forestry management, there is a lot of dead wood and tinderboxes out there. So in this next week, well, let's hope there's no fires get lit. And if they do, they're going to have a hell of a time getting them out. But let's just preemptively remind everybody, it's not climate change causing it. It's a heat wave. It's always happened. The hysteria, the alarmism, it's been coming out on the news with so many of these stories. I mean, that picture has just been fantastic, showing, weather broadcasters from only 6 years ago and weather forecasts for the weather just like today, and it shows the map with levels of green and blue and so on. Now it's searing red and deeper red, and the world is on fire, and it's the usual crap. Everybody be scared. It's a heat wave. When it rains really hard, it's a hard rainstorm. No, it's a weather event. It's a climate event. Guys, I'm getting exhausted with this constant instilling of fear from the part of the mainstream media, the legacy media. And I just look at something else. Kevin Peterson saying, please put on Drew. Okay, I do have Drew on today. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling. I'm supposed to have Jay Hill first. I'm afraid Jay isn't here for some reason at this point. So that's why I'm going to talk about news items and things like that, and even weather, I'm sorry. But Drew will be coming on a little later on the show too. Sarah Lindquist saying, I hope you start a Instagram account to continue to rant. I do have an Instagram account. I just don't use it very much. I'm not really good at it. I typically use Twitter for a hell of a lot of the stuff I do. A lot of my ramblings on there. I don't know what I'll do afterwards. I'm looking at a lot of things. I'm still going to be writing columns for the Standard. I'll still show up in the pipeline. I might do a podcast down the road. I don't know. I'm going to take a breather and see what I want to do. Take it easy for a little bit after this. And, it kind of ties back to when I was talking about how things are getting so hysteric and such Brad Hagen saying, as well, the negative news is exhausting. That's part of what wore me out here as well. I mean, this is what I do in here every day. And in preparation for this, what I have to do is I'm constantly reading news. I watch the evening news at night. I finish the night off by seeing what's happening out there on TV and the papers, the works. And it's almost like I've overdosed on the news content. It exhausts me. There's so much of it, and it's so negative. It's so fear-mongering, and it really has tired me out. Cliff saying midlife crisis. Oh, I don't know. As I mentioned the other day, my grandmother just turned 103. So I'm not, if we follow the family trend, I'm not even halfway through yet, guys. So you've got a ways before you manage to get rid of me here. So Shelly saying, who's taking my place? Well, we've got some great staff coming in. We're going to be taking care of the opinion editing and so on. And Melanie's going to continue with her shows. And there's going to be other specials and things like that. Linda Slobodian doing her things. And a lot of our reporters are going to be doing digital content. As for a live ongoing show, I'm not too sure what might come out of things. But I mean, things are far from gone. I'm not done. And the Western Standard's not done. We're just changing, I guess, some of the aspects. And I'm stepping away from some of the full-time stuff. So, I've got to take a breather, though, if only for my own sanity. I know it's a tenuous thing at the best of times anyways. And, you wouldn't want to see me go totally over the edge, honest. I promise it wouldn't be worth it for anybody here. Jay's in studio. We're just getting set up with him, and we'll start to chat on some federal issues in a moment. And we're ready to roll. Okay. Well, hello, Mr. Hell. How's it going?
Well, until I heard that you're leaving and departing, it was going very well.
Yeah, well,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Things change, and it's been going great. It's been a good ride, and we've established a lot. This show's come a long ways from where it was when we first started this thing going. The first attempts at live were a year and some ago, and they were horrific. And then we got going.
Don't be too hard on yourself.
As long as I know we're on an upward trajectory, and we got to this point, and it's just kind of at a point where we need another change, though.
Yeah. Well, I know I heard a little bit of your explanation on Friday, and I could relate to it. I was born and raised on a farm, and I never did get used to a 9-to-5 job. And I mean, that's fine for the millions of Canadians that are only too happy to have a job 9 to 5 and get up and go to the same place day after day. But it's never been for me. And obviously, you struggle with that a little bit as well, Cory.
A little bit, yeah. I just, and I commute from Prentice every day. I mean, it's not a huge drive, but it's a sizable one, and it makes for a long one. And I was oil field. I was traveling. I own my own business, and hectic. I like the hectic. And then this stability almost just started kind of grating on me a bit. And, I know I'm the weird one, but,
No, I don't think so. I think, that every entrepreneur is like that. They like to be their own boss. Yes, there's the uncertainty. There's the lack of security that comes with hopefully with a 9-to-5 job. There's some security to that, at least. And so I don't think that you're an oddball by any stretch, but it is a minority. I think the majority of people are only too happy to get into their career track and stay there.
Yeah, and good on them. It's important. It is, and it's just different things. So either way, I'd been finding I just hadn't been quite enjoying things as much. And hey, if you're not enjoying it, what's the point?
Exactly. Life is short, as they say.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm still a political addict and news watcher, as others, as I said, I kind of overdose on it a bit with this show, but it's the point of the show. So I'm always glad to bring you in. I'm glad to get in this final part of the show this week. And federally, that's your area of skill. You were in Parliament for, I believe it was 17 years.
That's right, Cory. Yeah.
And you got the Maverick Party going. I was talking a bit about that earlier. What are we looking at in the federal scene? Like, we've got a leadership race going on right now. It's looking very likely like Mr. Poilievre is going to win it. But could he win the federal election? Will the party split if he does win it? I mean, there's a lot of questions going on. We're kind of in a period of flux.
Well, my sense, and I'd actually like to pick up on what you were just talking about before I came on your set, because it does tie in with both, I believe, Danielle Smith in Alberta and Pierre Poilievre federally. And that is that there seems to be, and you touched on it, there seems to be this new culture in our society that in order to be noticed, you have to be abrasive. I'll put it that way. And I think part of it, I was just discussing this with a good friend of mine, Dave Rutherford, last night. And I think part of that is a byproduct, if you will, of social media. It used to be back when we were young, or certainly when I was young, that these national protests were virtually all peaceable. There wasn't riots, there wasn't looting, there wasn't people harmed, but now anymore, it seems like that's where it starts off on social media. But then at some point, to be noticed, for society, the citizens to pay attention to it, they have to escalate it. And unfortunately, I see at least that creeping into politics, where it seems like the people that are, right on the edge as far as aggressiveness are the ones that get noticed.
Yeah, well, and we see it at the left and right. We see a lot of pundits talk about we're polarized. We really are, in a way that we haven't been so much before. I mean, it's such factions. I'm over here, you're over there. I don't like you because you're over there. Well, you're an arsehole because you're over here.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always been a bit of that. That's nothing new. But this just seems so cut and dry now.
Yeah.
There isn't much of a mushy middle, and not much room for people to move to one side or another. They're too busy firing at each other.
No, and I've noticed it. I noticed it escalating, quite honestly, in the latter part of my career. I left Parliament in 2010, just before Stephen Harper won his majority government, and I noticed it then, being involved in the House of Commons and question period, that it was getting extremely antagonistic. It was getting in-your-face politics. There was a lack of respect, not only for people from another party and their point of view. Completely dismissing it, but even within the individual parties themselves, and certainly there was a growing disrespect for Parliament, for the institution itself. And there's a multitude of reasons for that, I believe, Cory, but it seems to me that since then, so in the next decade, say from the time I left, 2010 to what are we at, 2022, so a dozen years now, it's only gotten worse and worse and worse. And some of that, I think, is attributable to the rise of Donald Trump south of the border. He was right in your face politics. You either agreed with me or you're the enemy. And there was no room left for what I would call respectful debate.
Yeah, I mean, it really brought it up in that, again, as you said, he was one who could really grab the attention, and it worked, and it got him in as the president. But I mean, for those who opposed him, they became so mortified, and then the tone in pushing back, I mean, it
even
just
went further,
snowballed. And it became, it seems like an ongoing madness. And I look back to example for the truckers convoy, for example. I mean, never have we seen a sitting government, when there's some sort of large protest, just immediately dismiss it, call them extreme, call them racists, call them every name in the book without any basis. I mean, this is, again, you could disagree with that protest, absolutely. There was no racial component to that thing. There was no seditionists among them. I mean, some clown wrote something on a Facebook post, whatever. But that's the way the tone immediately goes.
Yeah.
And the media fed that, and each side just kind of, well, if you push me, I'm going to push back, and we're all losing, I think.
Well, as all too often happens in controversial issues, and let's face it, it was controversial. The whole intent for the convoy was to push back against government policy. They were opposed to the continuation of the mandates. They thought they'd outlived their usefulness, especially when it was applied to truckers. That, let's face it, I noticed on Friday was International Truckers Day, and you made reference to it, and good on you for doing that. But let's face it, a trucker spends probably 99% of his or her time alone. Like, what is the risk there of being a carrier of something like COVID? You really, when you look at the situation, you have to ask, what was the government trying to prove by, imposing this new mandate on the truckers? And so, people rose up and they said, this makes no sense. And as you say, they were vilified by our very own prime minister. Instead of him saying, I disagree with these people, but they have a right to disagree with their government. They have a constitutional right. So they're coming to Ottawa. I'm happy to meet with them. I'll give them 15 minutes of my valuable time when I'm not surfing, and I'll listen to their concerns.
Well, and you show some respect. You get out. I mean, I understand you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to capitulate, but you still have to respect. I mean, with even the worst of polls showed that perhaps 20% of Canadians supported that. Well, if you got that many, that's millions and millions of Canadians that you are dismissing in the worst of terms. At least, if you'd gone, you'd met with them or a couple of leaders. I understand you're not going to walk amongst them. Yeah, fair enough. But then you can turn around and say, yeah, they're crazy, but I tried sitting down with them. Yeah. And we can't reason any longer. Now we have to move. But when you dismiss them right from the first moment.
Well, even
happening
before
at
they
risk.
got there.
Yeah.
And you said, as you said, I mean, called them the most vile names. I mean, one of the leaders that's since been honored, I was pleased to be at a Calgary chapter of the Justice Center honoring Tamara Leash the other night. I believe it was Thursday evening. And I mean, her and her colleagues that organized that convoy were called misogynists. I mean, here's a female mother, grandmother, and a Métis of Métis heritage, you know, and so they were calling them racist. I mean, think about this. It's absolutely ludicrous. And yet that's our prime minister doing that, and he gets away with it. That's what really annoys people, especially people like you and I that have an option of speaking out.
Well, yeah, and it frustrates people though, and it can drive people on the other side to other extremes. And I mean, we've seen very vitriolic protests going after the prime minister at times, or Jagmeet Singh, you know, pebbles are thrown. I know people say it's minor, but no, when you're throwing things at an elected official, that's major.
Yeah.
Even if it's just pebbles, but that frustration keeps building, and then it drives people to feel that they're out of options, and they take more extreme, or at least, you know, more threatening poses sometimes, and it doesn't lead to a good democratic end.
And well, where does it end up? It ends up with, you know, something like what happened to Salman Rushdie the other day.
Yeah,
and I mean, nobody advocates for that type of solution to an expression of your disagreement. And it gets full circle back, and that's why I wanted to talk about this, and obviously you did as well, because you mentioned it in advance, is this new sense of aggressiveness on the part of political debate and rhetoric. And like you say, it's always been there. I mean, I participated in that. But there was an underlying respect before that people were allowed to hold a differing opinion. And I don't see that anymore from either side. You've got the extremes on the right and on the left, Cory, and those extremes are driving the debate, and they have absolutely no willingness to even listen to what the other side's point of view is.
Well, that's it. And I see, we know we got a federal election might happen sometime, any moment now, or perhaps in 3 years. I mean, minority governments, that's our nature. But if either liberals or conservative win a majority, I can't see the losing side accepting it. I see mass protests coming. I see, you know, similar to what we saw in the States, and it just, I don't want to sound too dejected. I'm hoping this goes circle and we come out of this mess somehow, but I don't know, maybe we can't do that without systematic change.
Well, of course, that's what I was advocating, continue to advocate for Western Canada. You know, when I founded the Maverick Party along with a small group of supporters, I've since done like you are about to do, and I stepped back in mid-May and turned the party over to its new leader and the group around him. So I too, I guess you run a certain course with a certain initiative, just as you have with Triggered, and then you need to reevaluate, you know, how much you're gaining, how much you're progressing. And so I took that step back, but I still fundamentally believe, I say I'm a slow learner. I've admitted to that. I admitted that, you know, my 17 years in Ottawa, if it didn't teach me anything else, it taught me that the parliamentary system and the system of government, and indeed Canada's constitution, is rigged against Western Canada. So I'm a big advocate, as I know you are, in systematic change. Can that ever happen? That's up to the scholars to debate. It certainly hasn't happened in the last 150 years. So I guess we'll have to see what Canada looks like going forward. But certainly I've been advocating very strongly, and that's why I put together the Maverick Party, is to try to give Westerners their own voice, similar to what the Bloc Québécois does in Quebec.
Well, that's it. And getting a voice, getting respect. Or I mean, I think what makes people feel they have to get a little extreme too is if they feel they're out of options. They feel there's no other means to express themselves, or any way they do express themselves, they get belittled or dismissed. And the media played a large part in this too.
Absolutely.
And, you know, where I see other stuff like bureaucratic leaders, and this is, I was seeing it just when you were coming in, this ongoing fear and stress and pressure. I saw one that Dave mentioned, I believe, on the news check-in with Tam, now saying, well, you know, we should be paying people who quarantine with monkeypox. Now, why are we quarantining people with monkeypox? We've pretty much established this doesn't transmit like COVID, you know, by breathing on a person or whatever. It takes some closer contact and other things. where has this gone to where we immediately react to everything then by quarantining and having the government fill it in? But why is monkeypox? I think it said on that we got 38 people in hospital across the whole country or historically on this, and we're calling it an emergency. But the government's banging the emergency drum, the civil servants are, and the media, of course, just follows along. Everybody's scared and stressed.
Yeah, exactly. And it's most unfortunate. And, you know, I think the big difficulty, certainly for myself, and I think for any thinking Canadian, is reflecting back over the last nearly 3 years now, coming up this winter, of COVID, is did we do the right things? You know, certainly government and health officials were reacting as best they could. I don't think that there was nefarious intent in any of the actions that were taken. But with the ability of hindsight, 2020 hindsight, to look back and say, okay, almost 3 years later, we still don't know. I'm quadruple vaxxed. I don't know whether that was the right decision. And, I just noticed today that the CEO and president of Pfizer was just diagnosed with COVID. He's quadruple vaxxed. So obviously he came in contact and he caught it and he tested positive, and he's probably got the equivalent of a serious flu, because that's what I understand the symptoms are most of the time, unless you really are immune deficient. So 3 years later, Cory, we still don't know where this is. And, so is it wrong that Canadians question this and that there's a debate even amongst families, even amongst couples? No, of course not, because nobody has all the answers.
Well, and a lot of the pressure that's been coming on is just belittling people who have questions. Like the infringement on individual rights. See, this is where I know I haven't gotten boosters or anything, but I got the first 2 vaccinations, fine. But my problem was the coercion. That's my problem. Let people choose. If somebody chooses not to,
and respect their right to choose.
Yeah, and I think I read a column recently where the Toronto Star had a headline from somebody saying, I don't care if they catch it and die then if they choose not to get immunized, they're fools. Whoa, these are, again, we're talking about millions of people who, whether you agree with them or not, deserve some respect and personally autonomy of body.
Yeah. Well, and as soon as someone makes a statement like that, it elicits the exact same statement from the extreme on the other side that says, well, if people choose to take the vaccine and they die from it, well, that's their choice, And so, as we've been discussing, that ends up in sort of a them versus us.
Yeah.
That type of a debate instead of a respectful debate, which, by the way, the Maverick Party, there was some confusion about it throughout the almost 3 years now. Our position all along was respect for choice, okay? Mm-hmm. And it always struck me odd that some of the most virulent people opposed to that position are the people that are pro-choice when it comes to the abortion issue.
Yeah.
So how can you pick and choose which ones you uphold your right to choose? And then say for those, when it comes to the vaccination, well, no, you have to go with the way I believe, whether it's opposed to the vaccine or in favor of it.
Well, and supporting the coercion again too, right? You were never forced. Okay, come on, guys. That's what gets me. If you took a woman and said, okay, we're not going to force you to do anything, but if you choose to get an abortion, we will fire you from your job. We'll stop you from traveling. We'll stop you from visiting family members. We won't let you into certain businesses.
You can't get on an airplane.
That would be in court so fast. Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't even be conceivable. I mean, the coercion would be well beyond the pale of even acceptable. But when it came to something as personal as medication, apparently that was acceptable. And the people who chose not to, for whatever their reasons were not respected.
Well, you have to go back to the beginning and look at the arguments why the government supposedly brought this very forceful process into place where they were effectively going to force people. They can call it whatever they want. And it was supposedly to protect the most vulnerable in society. Well, that's very admirable. I think it's something that all of us would agree with. We don't want to see grandma and grandpa put unnecessarily at risk. But did it accomplish that? I've never seen the evidence of that. Or could there have been a better way than shutting down society, costing the Canadian economy billions and billions upon dollars? Was there a better way to protect the vulnerable? That's the question.
Let's hope we'll manage to learn something from this, and that's the biggest. So kind of ran out of time fast. It always does when you come in, and I appreciate it. I'm glad you could come in this final week of the show. I'm kind of running through a lot of our regulars. I'll be talking to Drew as well, and many others, as we wrap things up here. So.
Well, I've enjoyed every appearance on your show, Cory. I enjoy the debate. It's always respectful, even when we differ.
Yeah, well, and you bring so much experience to the table. I do appreciate that, having been in there. So we'll be talking again, and I'll be doing other stuff. We'll be doing shows, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Well, good luck with whatever you undertake in the future. I'm sure you'll do a bang-up job as you have of Triggered.
Thanks. All right. So that was, guys, Jay Hill for... Well, I don't know. It must be Jay's 4th or 5th time on the show. I'm sure of it. And that's the part I'm going to miss with this show, though. A lot of these excuses to sit down with folks like Jay and others, though I'm sure I'm going to see them in other spots. And we'll keep solving all the problems of the world one step at a time, damn it. So, yes. And just a reminder to keep an eye out there. Jay is, vocal on social media and other areas and things such as that. Now we'll get on to another guest. We're coming back to back today, and this is one who's still masochistic enough to be in elected office. Jay at least ran for it, and that's Drew Barnes. He's been on a number of times too, and it's always a good conversation there too. So thanks for joining me today, Drew.
Cory, good afternoon. Thanks for talking to me. It'll be enjoyable.
Yeah. So, I kind of got a good political theme show. Well, it's not that unusual for me here. But Jay and I spoke a bit on the federal issues and the federal front, and of course with yourself, you're on the provincial front, and you're uniquely placed, in that independent status. And while it can be frustrating in some ways, you fully have you can speak for your constituents and speak openly, and we've got a really volatile provincial scene going on right now.
Oh, did we ever? And Cory, I'm grateful to represent Cypress Medicine Hat for 10 years, the full extent of that masochism you were talking about, and. I bet you 30 or 40% of my constituents now stop me and thank me and ask me to strongly consider running as an independent again. And I'm certainly, weighing all the options and looking at that. Yeah, I've had the great opportunity to speak up and highlight some important things. And I'm looking forward for the opportunity to continue to do that. Cory, as we look at the UCP leadership race right now, many of my constituents are telling me, they're disappointed that it's underachieved so far. They're looking for more taxes or more talk about lower taxes, more talk about smaller government that spends less. How often did Jason Kenney promise, a referendum on putting property rights in the Constitution? Large parts of Alberta are rural. And, Cory, maybe the thing I've heard the most about the last little while is rural Alberta feels more disadvantaged than ever. I'm hearing time and time again about Alberta Works not being there to provide adequate timely support. As land titles, 11 weeks to get something transferred. And the vast majority of these emergency room closures, temporary and more permanent, have been in rural Alberta. It's a time for change.
Yeah. And then, some of the tone and things like that. And we're seeing some unprecedented stuff. It's kind of what I was talking a bit with Jay about too, with the federal race. And then this provincial race, you can kind of speak from watching from the outside. And, you've been involved in politics for quite some time as well. When have we ever seen a sitting leader, even though outgoing, whether it's an interim leader or a finishing up leader, directly wade into a leadership race that's active like we had with Jason Kenney just the other day?
Yeah, that's appalling. That's so short-sighted. I stood on the steps the day after he lost his leadership review and decided to resign, calling for his immediate resignation. I was so surprised that Cabinet and caucus let him continue as the interim leader. That was the opportunity for whoever the interim leader chosen could have been, to start to rebuild unity, to start to reach out to Albertans, to start to repair, all these areas where Jason Kenney hasn't met expectations. And then now for him to come out on the weekend and question, one of the contenders' ideas. First of all, to me, it shows, how timid he's been in office. What is he so scared of? Try something. Albertans every day are telling me that it's time to fight hard for a fair deal with Ottawa. Secondly, it's not the Crown representative's job to overturn, or to decide on what is provincial jurisdiction and what is federal jurisdiction. That's up to the courts. And Cory, if a Supreme Court made a political decision again, like the carbon tax against Alberta, it only grows independence and separation anxiety. It only grows the strength of Albertans' willingness to fight for a fair deal. So for Premier Kenney to try to interfere on a taxpayer-funded radio show, a proper interim leader should have been chosen. A proper interim leader would stay out of that and focus on Alberta families and communities instead.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the the radio show that he was on, because I mean, okay, fine, you're going to do a weekly show and speak to Albertans. That's not a bad initiative. Ralph Klein did that a while back, and I think even Notley did a bit. Hey, opportunities for people to hear from the Premier, great. But if you're going to suddenly turn it into something to start meddling within an inter-party leadership race, you're abusing that seat, with that show. I mean, that was supposed to be for the Premier speaking, not a partisan shot at somebody running to replace you in the leadership race.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd say at this point, he's obviously a lame duck. I mean, until October 6th, we're less than 2 months away from that. Why are we doing this? It's just time to focus on the future. It's time to focus on Alberta families and Alberta communities. And again, Cory, I think at this point in time, the race has underachieved. It's been uninspiring. It hasn't connected Albertans like it needs to in order for the UCP to hold government against the NDP, 9 or 10 months from now. Albertans are telling me every day, hey, let's talk about the type of culture we want. Instead of a Premier running around giving 2 million here, 5 million there, let's lower taxes. Let's get back to our 10% flat tax. Let's raise the personal exemption so Alberta people have an opportunity to have more choice and get further ahead. I mean, what a no-brainer to re-index tax brackets versus inflation. What is the real inflation rate? Reported at 8 points, but it's much higher than that. And our small business tax. Our small businesses pay 2% tax on top of the 10% they already pay to Albertans. I mean, in most parts of the province, small business is still really struggling. Let's give these people some hope and opportunity to get back on their feet and provide all Albertans competition and choice and better pricing. These things aren't being talked about. I want to see more discussion about utility and insurance rates. We need way more competition in the insurance industry to bring the rates down. That's clear with what's happened with condos and cars and that kind of thing in the last little couple of years. Clearly with utility rates, it's sad, Cory, that you and me in 2011, 2012, and many other wild rosers clearly put it out there to Albertans that the PC overbuild of the transmission lines was going to come home to haunt us. And now we have seniors that can't afford their utility bills, mostly because of the cost of transmission and auxiliary charges. Let's come up with a solution for those things.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're in Medicine Hat, speaking of an area that learned to make a benefit of their local resources, in that it was the Medicine Hat Gas Company that was formed and supplied things out there. It was kind of unique that way because of those natural gas deposits around. And when we're talking about utilities and things that we're paying, I mean, we're an energy powerhouse, but if you look at your utility bill, it's not the cost of the actual power generation or the source of the power. It's 100 other little things that they nickel and dime and tax you with that beat you into the ground. And you can't hide from those things. Utilities are a necessity if you don't want to freeze to death.
Oh, absolutely. We've got that so far wrong, as so many people have put out there. But let's look at the bigger picture for a second. We've got all the candidates for the UCP leadership, particularly the supposed leader, talking about net zero emissions. What blows my mind, Cory, is I wasn't elected to help Justin Trudeau end our oil and gas industry. The reports I've seen on net zero emissions mean it could be a job loss of as high as 150 to 200,000 for Albertans. We all know that we're a carbon and an agriculture-based economy, and thank God for the rest of Canada we are. We've been carrying the heavy water the last little while. So let's just accept that how good of environmental producers we are now, and let's Carbon capture and storage is another thing that in the Wild Rose we used to fight against. And the continuation of that will make electricity rates 3 times more expensive than they need to be. Cory, I can't afford 3 times more in my electricity bills, and Albertans can't. And why would we? Why wouldn't we try to make things as competitive and as affordable for Albertans as possible?
Yeah, and then we get on to other things as well. As you're saying, it really comes to rural Canadians in general, I think, aren't properly respected by our government at all. I mean, that's a lot of the split that's been going on. And why aren't we hearing more from our provincial government? I mean, it's not shocking to see Trudeau do something as idiotic as to go after agricultural producers with fertilizer bans potentially. But you would think our provincial government should be very, vociferously standing up for our rural producers to say, hey, this is not an option. It's not in the cards. Back off right now, and let's get some commitments from you guys not to be cracking down on our ag producers. But we're not hearing anything about that.
We're not hearing anything about it, and it's very, very surprising. I guess the Sovereignty Act, if it comes to pass, may give the opportunity to challenge that. But clearly, let's start to use a notwithstanding clause. Let's start to build the Alberta agenda items so we can gain leverage with Ottawa. Clearly collecting our own taxes like Quebec does would go a long way to show Ottawa and Alberta citizens that we are strong and independent. We can stand on our own. It's one of the reasons, Cory, when I had my dissenting opinion 18 months ago on the Fair Deal panel, my solution was, hey, let's give Ottawa 3 years notice. 3 years from Ottawa, you've got 3 years to give Alberta a fair deal. 3 years from now, we're going to hold an independence referendum, and we'll let Albertans evaluate how well you've done with this. It is past time for Ottawa to accept that Alberta is a leader, that Alberta families need every opportunity for maximum individual opportunity and choice. And I don't know, I'm just not seeing it in the race right now.
Yeah, well, and I mean, so something I'm sure you've heard from a number of people lately, and then, it's getting speculative, but we asked about that during the debate we held in Calgary last week as well, was in the case of you and Todd as well. I mean, would any of the leaders welcome you back in a caucus? Most of them said, and I think that's fair enough, that if, put it to a caucus vote and caucus wants them back, then by all means. But then the other question is, would you want to come back into caucus necessarily? And I can only guess right now your answer might be along the lines of it depends, or perhaps you've made up your mind on where you want to go with things. How are things looking for you there, Drew?
Yeah, well, thank you, Cory. I'm weighing all my options, talking to my constituents and my family. I'm actually talking to my old UCP board here in the near future. But I'm a little disappointed with that too, with the candidates for running for UCP leadership. I would like to see that, instead of saying, Drew, if you support me, I'll work for you to get you back in. I think what they need to do is clearly call for me and Todd to be back in the UCP caucus. I mean, it was the constituents of Cypress Medicine Hat that voted me in as a UCP. It's clear now that I was ejected for, just speaking up on their behalf, for speaking my mind. Others spoke up louder than me after and were kicked out. So what I would like to see the leadership contestants do is call now for Drew and Todd to be put back in the UCP caucus. Again, the constituents are the ones that every 4 years have that right. Let's open the nominations. All 87 again. We've seen, as Jason Kenney had his thumbs on the scale of everything, when the local constituents had the opportunity to hold their MLAs accountable, and then they weren't allowed to with different people being, not allowed to run and different contests being canceled. I mean, this is just going to drive voter turnout lower. It just shows, it puts lack of trust in the system because local people can't hold their MLAs accountable. So let's start fresh. Here's where we are. Let's call for me to be back in the UCP caucus, and let's open the nominations, and let's see who comes forward.
Oh, that's a fair point. I mean, that's going back to our principles in the past of Wild Rose Party, I mean, the constituency level was sacrosanct, and we still had meddling coming from the leadership that just can't seem to resist themselves when it comes to that. But the principle's there. Leave it to the constituents to determine that, and then that person can speak as an individual on their behalf in the legislature. I think we can return to that, or I shouldn't say we, I'm not a party member anymore, but that's part of, I think, what's going on with the UCP. I mean, when you get a merger, UCP, it was the Wild Rose, it was the PCs. There's still some ideological clashes going on behind closed doors, even if unofficially, and it's making it difficult for that party to function respectfully and effectively.
Yeah, exactly. We need more and more Albertans to be involved. I've been asking them to give us 15 minutes a month, 5 minutes for your country, 5 minutes for your province, and 5 minutes for your municipality. I've advocated that, the UCP and any provincial party should just draw as many nominations as they can handle at one time out of the hat. Make it as random as possible so all 87 constituencies have to have strong memberships and stay involved and be ready to go. It allows less, interference from the party. But, Cory, what's also interesting is from around the province, I've had at least 15 constituencies approach me and say, hey, why don't we look at running, 10, 15, 20 independents around the province and try to be a loose group of independents that believes in, conservative values, but believes first and foremost in standing up for our constituencies and our local needs. And there's a real appetite for that right now from Albertans. So I'm looking forward to the next month or two to discuss this and see what happens.
Well, right on. We're certainly at a turning point in Alberta in this next few months and, this year. I mean, we've got another general election coming. So I appreciate you being a voice for the old common sense and principle out there and Cypress Medicine Hat. And I look forward to seeing, where you go with things as they go. So thanks again for coming on to talk to us today, Drew. It's always a good conversation. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. Just won't be on this show.
Thank you, Cory. All the best wishes to you. Take care.
Great. Thanks. So that is independent member for out in Cypress Medicine Hat, Drew Barnes. And I mean, Drew's been consistent. That's one thing to be given. I mean, he's not bouncing around like a ping pong ball like so many of our politicians out there. He's always stuck to those original principles he was elected on, whether you agree or disagree with them. It has to be respected. And it's always good to, I can take advantage of his independent status to be able to speak to somebody who's in the legislature on something like a race like this when he doesn't have a horse that's in it. So you can get a more, straightforward interpretation on what's going on and what's happening there. So it was good to have Drew on. It always is, and it'll be interesting to see where things go in the future. Okay, so I'm running a little behind. I got to get on to one of our sponsors here, and that is Resistance Coffee Company. I'm going to do a couple of back-to-back ads here because these guys help pay our bills, of course, too. And these guys are fantastic. Again, my Liberal Tears cup here that I do enjoy so much. The other side, it does say Resistance Coffee Company on it. This is a Western company. They're, again, as you can see with things like Liberal Tears, they're unapologetically conservative and supporting freedoms. And they make sure that your money, when you buy something, doesn't go into some weird woke cause or some left-wing cause or something like that. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's very transparent. You go to their site, resistancecoffee.com, and you'll see where they're giving funds to things like the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms and other causes like that are helping you. Plus, hey, if you order your coffee from them or your swag, these cups, t-shirts, all sorts of cool stuff, Liberal Tears, Defund the CBC, Tree Hugger, all those things, you get 10% off. If you go to resistancecoffee.com/triggered, and you get 10% off that first order. So 10% goes to a good cause, 10% comes off the price, and you get good coffee, and it is good coffee. You don't have to drink bad coffee to make a point. You're actually getting good coffee for your deal. And you're supporting us with another one of our sponsors as well. So check them out, resistancecoffee.com, and use /triggered to get that first 10% off. And I'm going to speak also of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys, I've talked about them every show because they're a fantastic sponsor and they are a fantastic group. If you own firearms, you're thinking of owning firearms, or you just respect other people's rights to own firearms, you should be a member of this group. They offer resources like any other association, whether it's, networking with other firearm owners or upcoming events, shooting events, trade shows, things like that. That's all there for you. Videos on safe firearm use, sports, things like that. But most important of all, with Tony Bernardo and the CSSA, they're pushing back on your behalf. They are standing up for your rights because you got a government that's trying to take away your right and ability to legally, responsibly use firearms. And it is a big problem. If you don't get together and stand up for yourself, you will lose. They'll get it. They will get your possessions and they'll steal them from you. And I call it theft. I don't care if the government calls it a buyback. If I'm not offering it for sale, doesn't matter how much you pay me. If you take it, it's theft. So get on there, guys. Join them. It's not that much, and it's well worth it. Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Just Google them or go to their website, cssa-cila.org. Okay, let's see. Jet Corrigan saying, Western Standard, could you please do a daily show with guest hosts so our group can stay in touch? And again, the Standard's far from done with this aspect, Jet. We're not sure what's going to happen exactly, but the digital is going to keep expanding. Nico's still here doing fantastic stuff. There's a lot of other people in here. There's going to be more productions. How it all settles down in the end, I'm not sure. But Triggered, yes, it's going to be wrapped up by the end of this week. But let's see. If one of the old guards, this is from Edwin Newman, if one of the old guards, including Danielle, crosses the floor, Smith gets to be leader. Many with integrity UCP members will stay home, vote day, Todd Low, and walks the talk. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's Danielle Smith's biggest handicap. And I've said that a number of times. And it's a very valid question. I've watched, there's an activist fellow out there on Facebook who's practically obsessed. I mean, he's just going crazy. Nothing but negative, constantly attacking Danielle Smith. And it's gotten to the point, actually, where it's just white noise. But there's some valid questions to be asked about Danielle. By the way, Jordan, no, it's not the same Nico for one of the commenters there. It's a valid question about her judgment. Like I've listened to Danielle apologize, whether when she was on the radio or whether it was on this show when I've talked to her on interviews, or many times she's explained what her thinking was when the floor crossing happened and why she did it. And I do genuinely believe she knows it was a bad decision and is contrite about it. The question people have, though, is would she still potentially make another bad decision? I don't think she'd make the same one, but people question judgment. And that's going to be up for the UCP members to try and figure out. Because, I mean, she's very smart. She's very ambitious. She's definitely, inspires a lot of people, and she's doing really well. But there's that fear that she could still potentially implode on something else. So we'll see. It's up to the members, but we are in for some interesting times. All right. Let's see here. Some other stuff, a little bit positive. This was a report. I talked about this the other day. I think we still need to completely reform our healthcare system. That's a given. I mean, it's broken. It's running short across the whole country. It's not working anywhere. But there are innovative ideas. This one's surprising, and I'm thankful it's gone, though we could still certainly do better with a different system and allow more things. But this was a program, I guess, launched this year, a pilot program giving virtual connections between Albertans and doctors. And I guess 8,000 patients have been assessed over the phone or via video conferencing with AHS speaking to a nurse anyways, with the nurse referring them to a doctor if it's needed. And I think these kinds of things, these innovations, I mean, a lot of the battle, where the opposition to this is going to come? Unions. It's always the unions. Because, I mean, their whole thing is just about getting more and more union employees. That's all. That's what they're about. Fair enough. But they don't support innovation, no matter what they claim. It's just like teachers' unions saying, we're going on strike, but it's for the students. No, you're going on strike for yourself. You always only go on strike for yourself. Likewise with this, because this might cost some jobs, though I don't think so, because the health services, the system is overwhelmed enough as it is. But if we can start to develop more things where people can check something out, safely through virtual conferencing. I guess we got to worry a little bit about litigation too. That's part of what frightens some people. You get a misdiagnosis on the phone where somebody says, "Don't worry about that lump, you're all right," and then it explodes and kills them the next day, and they get sued. There's worries, but still, for a lot of minor things, when people are concerned, you could deal with that with a virtual call with a nurse or a health professional of some sort on a screen or on a phone even. And we should be looking into more of those options rather than having somebody come into a hospital or another clinic or an urgent care center when they really didn't need that urgent care. So I'm just saying, sometimes there's some good stuff being done, and I hope it continues. Because, I go on about the crappy stuff all the time, and I'm going to go on about some in a moment here. Here we go with government new of short staffing. Dave did mention that, I'm sure, on the check-in. Transport minister, and I like to talk about how stupid Trudeau's cabinet is, because they're stupid. And he's another of those brilliant examples. Omar Al-Ghabra. man, he's just not a sharp knife. But again, Justin keeps himself surrounded by dim folks. I feel he's probably insecure about having, other folks around him who are brighter. So he just keeps that bar low. The analogy I used in the past too is, the good looking but insecure girl who would make sure to surround herself by people who might not look as good as her before she goes to the bar so she could stand out among the crowd. So either way, we found out that he knew last spring that the airports were short-staffed by 25%. So we're talking 5 months ago. They knew this problem was coming. So many of these things we're finding out constantly. The government knew, but they didn't act. They're sitting here acting. We didn't know that the airports were going to get all backed up. Yes, you did, actually. You knew this months ago, but you're too incompetent and inept to fix it. See that other stuff as well. I mean, speaking of governments that knew, that's a big bombshell that hit recently that came out in some court documents. And we talked a little bit about that on Friday. I mean, the government cabinet knew that potentially the city of Ottawa was negotiating a breakthrough with the protesters and the convoy last winter. And they still said, screw it, we're going to impose the Emergencies Act anyway. Now, the Emergencies Act is martial law. Let's not sugarcoat that thing. It's setting aside your individual rights. It's lifting your rights, suspending your rights. It is the nuclear option. It is a last resort. So if you're going to impose that, that means there's no hope. And that was absolutely clearly not the case. There was a chance. Maybe the negotiations would have blown up. Who knows? But you have to try every other avenue before you suspend individual rights. And Trudeau's government said, nah, screw you guys. We're going to impose it anyway. I think part of it, they didn't want a resolution. They wanted this just watch me moment. But Trudeau's too stupid and weak, not like his father, to turn that into a historical moment where he looked good. He looked like an imbecile who I think, as we keep examining the imposition of an Emergencies Act, we're realizing this government had absolutely no place in imposing it. So likewise, with this transportation, this is an incompetent, underperforming government on every level. And we've got this transportation crisis. It is the government's fault. It absolutely is. They knew it. They managed the airports. They're in charge of it. They screwed it up. And likewise with the truckers convoy, we keep hearing these things. Here's an interesting one. So the Treasury Board reporting, federal employees, naloxone kits will not be distributed to federal buildings in case of drug overdoses because federal employees shouldn't be taking drugs in the office. Okay, there's a federal policy I could probably agree with. You should probably lay off the fentanyl and heroin while you're doing whatever the hell you do as a civil servant. But what a bizarre thing. We've got naloxone here in our office. Not that anybody that I know of in the Standard is taking any opioids right now, but we are downtown where there are unfortunately overdoses happening all the time. So we want to have it handy in case it just happens to have somebody goes down and we have the ability at us. But this was a big deal for the government to say, well, we've said that you're not allowed to have drugs, and be on drugs while you're in the office. And then of course people are upset that they're saying that they're not carrying naloxone. I don't know. There's bizarre stuff going on there. Again, this is what I'm talking about. The system is bloated. The system is broken. When at every level with civil service, when you get government running anything, they run it wrong. That's the only consistency they have, is they suck. This is an issue that kind of comes, it's complicated. This one's a little different. So, here's where municipalities can't block federally approved projects. A judge just recently ruled. The decision came in the town of Milton, tried to block a railway that was federally approved. And the town lost. This is really hard because I believe in decentralization of power. I want as much to be locally dropped down as possible. Get the feds out of it. Get the province out of the municipal things. Let's just back off. But then at the same time, when you've got projects that are large and a large scale, if we're talking about things that cover multiple jurisdictions, whether it's an airport, a rail line, a pipeline, then sometimes you might need government to step in on that individual localized municipality or jurisdiction or area and say, no, that's going to happen. Federally with our Constitution, that's one of the things I've said too as an independent supporter. One of the biggest things of the Constitution is that the government is supposed to be able to override and say, look, when it's a federal matter, such as an interprovincial pipeline, provinces don't have a choice. So Quebec, you can whine and stomp and piss and moan all you like, but that pipeline's going across your province. BC, same thing. Or if Alberta wanted to stop a rail line that's coming across, fair enough. No, but now this government as well, this is something that Derek Fromm, a lawyer, likes talking about a lot. He spoke at a function a while ago interprovincial trade as well. I mean, our Constitution says you cannot infringe on interprovincial trade, but the government does. And it was a case of beer going from New Brunswick into Newfoundland, I think it was, or Quebec into New Brunswick. Either way, he was buying it cheap on one side, bring it to the other, and he got arrested and charged for it. And the bottom line is they said, yes, the Constitution says that you should be allowed to bring that across all you want as a Canadian citizen, but we're going to look the other way and basically screw you. The Constitution doesn't matter. And that's what, if the Constitution doesn't matter, then why the hell does Canada matter? Why are we a confederation? Why are we holding together if we can't even have that federal binding of us working as a unit? Either I'm starting on a side note, but I'm just saying these issues of jurisdiction get complicated and they get tough. So, you know, with the court telling a municipality they have to allow the railway, I sort of side with the court, but I sort of feel for the municipality when you want to stand up for yourself as a local jurisdiction. Some aspects of government will never be easy. But anyway, let's look at some other things. Here's an interesting one. You probably saw this one in the news. After 10 months long investigation by multiple Ontario police services, resulted in more than 400 charges laid, 22 individuals accused of smuggling guns and drugs over the U.S. border. Yes, the police know this. The police in general aren't the ones supporting the gun grab and the handgun bans and all that crap. They know where the guns are coming from. And in this case, they are coming across the border. They're coming from the south. But you know, part of the other reason why the government's terrified of doing anything about this? This had 27 handguns in this one bust, by the way, that they found in this bust. But the other thing was, it was First Nations Reserve where they were smuggling them across the river. And if you go back another little story, just say from March, in Cornwall, another 6 individuals were taken in with a whole bunch of 185 charges laid and a bunch of gun-related firearms, illegal firearms that they had as well with this bunch that they busted. And guess what? It was the Akwesasne Reserve that was smuggling them across. As I've talked about before, the only thing that terrifies bureaucrats and government even more than standing up to unions is doing anything to do with First Nations and getting in on their ground. And they, if it was anybody but First Nations going back and forth with boats and drones and everything and smuggling things across that river out there, the government would be all over it. You notice neither of these busts happened where the smuggling's going on. They did these busts once the product is deep into Ontario because they are terrified of dealing with anything on those reserves. People remember the Akwesasne Reserve has had some pretty volatile happenings on it. The government just doesn't want to touch it. But in the meantime, they will happily stomp on the rights of law-abiding citizens all across the country with a firearm freeze that will do nothing to reduce crime. So they know where the crime is for real, or at least they know where the guns are coming from for real, but their own political cowardice keeps them from doing anything about it. Instead, they'll come after us. Here's an interesting one. Trudeau and Chancellor Scholz of Germany are looking to sign some green energy agreement to build up a hydrogen industry in Newfoundland for exporting. This is supposed to be a zero-emission plant, and it's going to use wind energy to produce hydrogen and ammonia for export. I thought ammonia was something we're supposed to be cutting back on as well. Wasn't that one of those things that was causing emissions for on fertilizer and uses in farm applications? So why? There's not. Speaking of consistency, this government's not consistent with their things. Plus, if you're doing these things, again, is this going to be tax funded, or are you just letting a company set up? Hey, if it's private dollars and they're getting going, good on them, let them go. Excellent, but I don't trust this. And again, this hydrogen market, if it's feasible, let it go. Just get out of the damn way. But I don't believe it. I don't trust it. And there's a lot of potential hydrogen that can be produced in Alberta too, but we'll never get a pipeline to be able to move it or any means of however you could. Let's see, Canada. There's warnings that the CRTC power is too broad under C11. And yeah, this is just more of the same old news we hear all the time. But there's a coalition saying, that this crackdown on information, this crackdown on news, crackdown on shows like this is going to be problematic for us. Well, yeah, I don't know what it takes, but it's going to get shoved through the government because we got Trudeau and we got his little backdoor man there, Jagmeet Singh, and they're going to push that through. So we're going to have to reverse it and do something about it. Nikki Hurley says Hudson Bay. I think you're talking about then options for export and getting our product out. I am with you. That's another one of the options that looks good. But I tell you what, it's impossible to get a large project done in this country under the environment it's in. Even Hudson Bay, look, there's going to be some protesters. You know it. They're going to complain. And our federal government will not stand up for that project. And if it crosses provincial lines, it goes into their turf and they'll mess with it. We need to change the government. We need to change the system. And that always goes back to my independence conclusions. But maybe some people still think we can fix the system from within. And while we're in it, we still have to work with it to a degree and try and make things as good for ourselves as possible. But who knows? Weird story. Again, showing inefficiency of government. There was a car parked, this was in Winnipeg, for 10 years on a spot in a park. 10 years. People couldn't get this thing. I mean, people complained and moved. And the city of Winnipeg, once it hit the news that this car, I guess it was turning into like a landmark in the area that's been sitting there rotting in the middle of a park, suddenly the Winnipeg moved it along. Just weird, odd side items. I like to report on how incompetent government is in general. It takes them 10 years to move a car. You park in the wrong no parking zone somewhere else, and it'll be towed away in 15 minutes. But this one took 10 years. There's another one. The federal government quietly updated its rules at the border to allow fully vaccinated travelers entering through a one-time exemption from fines or quarantine requirements if they unknowingly fail to submit the required health documents through ArriveCan. Oh, come on, you clowns. Just dump it. This quarantine bullshit. It's bullshit. I'm sick and tired of it. The vaccinated part doesn't make a damn difference. We know that. That's proven. It's not even up for debate anymore. These bloody apps and this quarantine requirements are nothing but harassment and hounding of citizens, tourists, visitors, and it's hurting this country. And this imbecilic, incompetent federal government insists on keeping these regulations pushing us down. It's hurting us. It provides no health benefit to anybody. It's just vindictiveness packed into policy and stubbornness from an imbecile of a prime minister who travels around the world. I think he's still down in Costa Rica right now, hounding the commoners with this ArriveCan crap with backed up airports as it sits. So they're celebrating. They've allowed one exemption, a one-time exemption for fully vaccinated travelers coming through a land border. Oh, come off it. Get rid of this crap, you guys. Nobody else in the world's doing it. We don't need it anymore. But they celebrate this, and they quietly run it through because they're scared to even lighten up a bit. All right. That's enough ranting out of me. So yes, just a few other folks who are joining late. Yes, this is the final week of Triggered. Again, I'm not vanishing. I'm still going to write columns for the Standard, and I'll make appearances and do things, and I'll be doing other social media stuff and my Twitter and everything else. I got a couple emails from people asking, by the way, are you going for politics? No, that's not where I'm going. I'm just moving off from being full-time here, guys. And we got 4 more shows to go, and they're going to be good ones, guys. So tomorrow I got Jean Charest and Mike Thomas. He's one of our columnists who's on quite often. Like I said, I'm going to run through a lot of our local personalities and my regular guests in this final 4 days here, guys. And there'll be lots of other stuff to discuss and news and items and rants to do. So thank you all for joining me today, guys, and I will see you all again tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp.